The first time I gave her something I made, I was 17. It was late spring, the kind of afternoon where the sun is warm, but the air still bites. I'd spent almost 2 weeks in the garage, hunched over a wobbly table, sanding scraps of cedar until my fingertips were raw. I didn't know what I was doing, not really. But I kept at it, like something inside me wouldn't let me stop. The box was small, uneven. I carved thin vines along the lid, like the ones that used to grow wild against the garden fence before she made me cut them down. In the bottom corner, I scratched my initials with the point of a nail. Inside, I tucked a bit of lavender wrapped in one of her old scarves I found in a drawer. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd see what it meant, that it was for her, that it was from me. She was in the kitchen when I handed it to her. A cigarette between her fingers, one slipper dangling from her foot. She looked at the newspaper wrapping, eyebrows raised like she was already unimpressed. When she peeled it back and saw the box, her mouth twitched. "You made this?" she asked. I nodded. She turned it over like it might break apart in her hands. The light from the window caught the lopsided lid. She laughed, a short, hollow thing. "How quaint," she said. "Very rustic." She set it down on the counter beside the coffee pot, and that was it. No thank you, no smile, just a shrug, and then back to her crossword. That was the moment something in me pulled back, not snapped, not broke, just quietly stepped behind a wall. My name is Elise Monroe, and that was the first time I gave someone a part of myself and watched them set it down like it didn't matter. Later that night, I found the box on her vanity table shoved between a crystal perfume bottle and a chipped jewelry tray. It sat there for years, collecting dust. Ignored, but never thrown away. I kept making things after that. Little things, quiet things, things no one ever asked for. I didn't stop, even when her silence grew sharper than her words. I started carving in secret, pendants from driftwood, candle holders from broken branches. Sometimes I left them on park benches. Sometimes I kept them hidden in shoeboxes beneath my bed. There are 2 kinds of making. One for the world, for the people who clap and smile, and one for the spaces that never clapped for you. The first box, that uneven, fragile thing, belonged to the second kind. It didn't get applause. It didn't get kindness. But it still came from my hands, and that meant it mattered, even if she never said so. I moved out the week after graduation. No big fight, no slammed doors. She just said, "You'll be back," like it was gravity, like my return was inevitable. I packed light 3 boxes, mostly closed sketchbooks, and my carving tools wrapped in old pillowcases. The box I made her wasn't among them, or at least I didn't think it was. But when I opened my duffel 2 nights later in my new apartment, there it was, tucked beneath a sweatshirt, like she'd slid it in last minute, like a punchline I didn't get. The place I moved into was barely a room, paint peeling from the corners. Shared bathroom at the end of the hall. My window looked out at a brick wall that turned purple when the sun set. I called it home, even though it didn't feel like one. Not yet. I took 2 jobs. One answering phones at a dentist's office where patients called in screaming about root canals. The other, building seasonal displays for a department store, fake snow glass icicles, mannequins with impossible waists. At night, I came home and sketched. I'd sit on the floor with my knees tucked under me, draw, until the pencil wore down to air. She'd call sometimes, not to check on me, just to keep the rhythm of her voice in my life. "You still chasing that design thing?" I'd say yes. She'd sigh. "You're not exactly built for disappointment, Elise." Sometimes she said it gently, other times like a joke, but always, like she'd already decided what I was allowed to be. I still remember the first time I told her I wanted to study design. I was 16, holding a brochure from an art school in Rhode Island. She looked at it for maybe 3 seconds before setting it on the coffee table like it might stain the glass. "Why not make something practical for once?" she said. "You're good with your hands. You could be a dental hygienist. People always need teeth cleaned." She had this way of saying practical that made it sound like a compliment, like a cage wrapped in ribbon. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Then went to my room and drew until sunrise. In my new apartment, I kept the box on the windowsill. It sat there like a wound that never scabbed. I didn't open it, didn't even touch it. But I saw it every time I came home, every time I leaned over to look at the sky. Still uneven, still mine. The sketch that got me noticed wasn't anything special. Just a lamp. But the lines were clean, and the concept, a bloom of curved wood backlit by filament, felt like something pulled out of my ribs. A teacher from a community course saw it, said, This you should build." I didn't believe him, but I built it anyway. And that lamp, the first of many, became the thing that opened a door. Not wide. Just a crack, but enough. She didn't ask about it, didn't ask about my jobs, didn't ask about anything really. When I called her once just to talk, she said, "Still playing with glue and string?" I said, "Yes." She paused. Then, "Well, some of us grow out of that, some don't." That was the last time I reached out first. Silence stretched out after that, like a hallway with no end. And somehow that quiet started to feel like permission. Permission to try, to fail, to build something without asking if it was enough. I learned to live with less. Less praise, less certainty, less fear, but more room, more time, more truth. I kept the box, still unopened, still a weight I chose to carry. Some days I stared at it like a riddle I'd never solve. Other days, it just blended in, part of the backdrop, like it had always been there. Sometimes I think that's what she did best. She made me doubt the shape of what I wanted. Not through rage or cruelty, but with the soft erosion of certainty. A tide that never stopped lapping at the edge of me. But you can learn to live with tides. You can learn to stand ankle deep and still build something that floats. February was the worst of it. There was a leak in the ceiling right above the stove. It dripped like a clock, slow, patient, impossible to ignore. I didn't have enough to fix it, didn't have enough for much of anything really. For 26 days, I ate canned peas, the cheap kind, the ones that taste like metal and sadness. Sometimes I'd add salt. Sometimes a little hot sauce from the bottle someone left in the hallway kitchen. Most nights it was just peas in a chipped bowl. I stopped pretending it was temporary. There was a boy then, Noah. He lived upstairs, wore the same gray hoodie every day, and smelled like sawdust and detergent. He knocked once when the fire alarm went off in my unit, burnt toast, and never really stopped knocking after that. He liked my sketches. Said they made him feel like he was remembering something from a dream. He never asked me what they were supposed to be. He just looked, really looked, like he saw more than lines on paper. He stayed over 4 nights in a row once, brought a pillow the second night, left his toothbrush in the sink. On the 5th morning, I woke to an empty bed. His shirt was still on the chair. But the pillow was gone. So was the toothbrush. I didn't text him, didn't ask why. Just swept the crumbs off the counter and sat down to eat another bowl of peas. That afternoon, I cleaned. Not the kind of cleaning that fixes anything. The kind you do when you're trying to remember what your life feels like without someone else's footprints in it. I found the box while pulling old receipts from the bottom of my duffel. The one I'd made her. I hadn't touched it since I moved. It looked smaller than I remembered. Dustier. But the carving was still there. the soft curves of the vines, my uneven initials tucked into the corner. There was a faint scent of lavender, long faded. I sat on the floor with it in my lap for a long time. Long enough for the light to shift and the room to go cold. I thought about what it meant, that she had put it in my bag. Not in kindness, not in apology, more like a final joke. I thought about throwing it out. I even walked it to the trash can, stared into the dark mouth of it, held it there. But I couldn't drop it. My fingers wouldn't unclench. So I put it on the shelf above my desk, next to a potted plant that was mostly dead. That night, I started carving again. Just a little piece of scrap pine I'd kept in a drawer. No plan, no sketch. Just my hands and the blade. I didn't know what I was making, but the motion felt like breathing, like remembering something my body knew even if I didn't. The neighbors were loud. Someone was crying in the hallway. But I carved through it, one line, then another, until the shape started to emerge. By morning, it looked like a wing, small, delicate. Not perfect, but real. I ran my thumb across it until I couldn't feel the grain anymore. Then I placed it next to the box. Not as a replacement, just as something new. There's a difference between surviving and choosing. That month, with its peas and echoes and vanished boy, taught me that. I wasn't choosing yet, but I was learning how. And sometimes that's enough. 3 years later, I was standing in a white room that smelled like fresh paint and metal polish. My work hung from the ceiling in slow-breathing arcs, light wrapped in bent wood, soft fabric pulsing around hidden wires. It was the first time I saw strangers stop and stare. The first time their silence didn't feel like something closing in. I wore a black dress with a high collar, my hair pinned up, hands sweating in the pockets. I kept thinking someone would tap my shoulder and ask me to leave. But they didn't. They stayed, and they looked. She came halfway through the night. I felt her before I saw her, that scent of rosewater, and control the faint clack of heels too sharp for the floor. When I turned, there she was, pearls at her neck, lipstick too red, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elise," she said, like we were bumping into each other at the grocery store. "Your sister said you were doing installations." She waved a hand vaguely. The pieces shifted in the light behind her. Curved wings, floating lanterns. She walked past them all like they were decorations at a wedding she didn't want to attend. She stopped in front of the final piece. A pedestal, and on it the box. The original one. Polished, still uneven, still mine. It was the only piece I hadn't named. Just a small brass plaque beneath it that said, Untitled 17. She glanced at it, didn't recognize it, didn't even pause. At the exit, she touched my arm. Fingers cold. "You've done something," she said. "Some of it's interesting, but I just don't see the point." I didn't answer. She smiled, like that was kindness, and then she left. I stood still after she was gone. The noise of the room dimmed. People passed behind me sipping wine, talking softly, but everything felt very far away. An hour later, a man in a gray suit with thick glasses approached the pedestal. He looked at the box for a long time. Then he said, "There's something wounded in this, and something that survived." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He bought it. Full price. Didn't ask what it meant. He just said, "It feels like someone remembered how to breathe." That night, I walked home in silence. The cold burned my lungs, but I didn't zip my coat. When I got in, I made tea. Sat on the floor beside the heater. I thought about the way she had passed that box like it was a stranger. How she didn't even pause. And for the first time, it didn't ache. Not exactly. It just felt distant. like watching someone forget your name in a dream. I still didn't know what to call what I was building. It wasn't a career yet, not really, but it was mine. Every flawed edge, every piece that started in the dark, every room that let me in. The next morning, I carved something new. Not out of sadness, not even out of hope. Just because I could. My sister's wedding was held in the kind of country chapel people take pictures of when the leaves start to turn. Whitewashed walls, twinkle lights in mason jars, everything soft and coordinated lavender and gold, even down to the ribbons on the chairs. I arrived early, wore a simple black dress. High neckline, long sleeves, tailored just enough to feel like armor. She found me near the dressing room inspecting the programs. She didn't say hello, just tilted her head eyes moving from my shoes to my shoulders. Then softly, almost kindly, "Don't wear black tomorrow. It makes you look harsh." I didn't respond, didn't nod. Just folded the program in half, slipped it into my bag, and walked away. At the rehearsal dinner, she sat across from me at a table draped in white linen and politeness. Talked loudly about my sister's new in-laws. Their lake house, their successful children, their Christmas parties. She only addressed me when someone asked what I did for work. Her answer came quicker than mine. "Elise does art installations," she said, smiling tightly. "They're very conceptual." That last word had the weight of a shrug. I cut my food into small, even squares. Didn't eat much. Didn't speak unless someone else pulled the words out of me. After dinner, the photographer gathered the family for pictures. We stood in rows beneath strings of lights. My mother positioned herself beside me. Her hand slid into mine like choreography. Then low and fast, she said, "Smile. People are watching." I did. The smile didn't reach my eyes. In the photo, my jaw looks locked, like I'm holding something in. Or back. She posted the photo the next morning, captioned it, "My girls." One traditional one, artistic. The words sat there framed by digital hearts. Smug, exact. Like she'd finally found the right box to put me in. The wedding itself was beautiful. My sister looked radiant, nervous, real. She cried walking down the aisle. Her hands trembled at the vows. I sat in the second row alone. Let my thoughts drift. Not to love or future or family, but to the weight of being seen and never quite known. Of being shaped by someone's shadow and told it was light. After the ceremony, my mother hugged me, pressed a kiss to my cheek. "I'm glad you made it," she whispered, and for a moment I almost believed her. Back at the hotel, I took off the dress slowly, hung it on the back of the door, turned off all the lights except the one beside the bed, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Not searching for flaws, not checking my posture, just looking. There's something strange about knowing you no longer fit the role someone wrote for you, that you grew taller than the ceiling they imagined, that you are still here despite, because of, in defiance of all the ways they tried to define you. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, lit the small travel candle I always packed but rarely used, and sketched. Not with any plan. Just to hear the sound of pencil on paper. It was a dress. Nothing like the one I wore. Wilder, frayed, moving with invisible wind. A shape that didn't care to be pretty, only honest. I drew until the paper went soft at the edges. Then I folded it carefully, placed it inside the carved wing I'd made last year, closed it like a secret, like something waiting. The next morning, I saw the wedding photo again. My mother had added a comment. "Wouldn't trade these two for the world. One makes me proud, the other makes me think." I didn't reply. Just saved the image to my phone. Not to remember, but to study. to hold proof of the difference between being loved and being displayed. It was late October when he called. My father. His name lit up my phone like a question. I hadn't seen him since I was 15. The last time we were in the same room, he had one suitcase, one jacket, and a sentence he never finished. He said, "You'll understand someday." Then he left, and the house grew quieter, sharper. When I answered, there was static first, then his voice older, slower, touched by something I couldn't place. "Elise," he said, "saw one of your pieces in a magazine, something with light and glass." I waited. It didn't sound like a compliment, more like surprise, dressed up as curiosity. "I didn't think you'd keep going," he said. I said nothing. "Then why did you leave?" The line went quiet for 6 long seconds. "Your mother always worried you'd be soft," he said, like that was an answer. Like softness was something you could inherit like bad knees. I swallowed, then asked, "Do you remember the box I made her?" Another pause. He sighed. "That little thing, she used it to store paperclips. Paperclips. Not jewelry. Not letters. Not memories." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I have to go," I said, and I did. That night, I didn't turn on any lights when I got home, just lit the candle by the window. The one I never let burn all the way down. Silence filled the apartment like a tide, slow, creeping heavy. I didn't play music, didn't cook, just sat on the floor and watched the flame shift. I thought about that box, the months it sat on her vanity, the way it disappeared when I left, how I found it years later in the bottom of my bag like a message slipped into my ribcage. She used it for paperclips, not out of practicality, out of dismissal. I kept folding a blanket across my knees long after I was warm. Let the quiet press in. There's a certain weight silence has when it comes from people who were supposed to fill the air. Some nights I could still hear her heels on the kitchen tile. Her voice slicing the air like sugarcoating wasn't sharp. The sound of the faucet dripping, of her breath catching before she said something designed to sting. The silence was different now. Less cruel, more honest. It told me what words never did, that her love had conditions, that my softness was a threat, that beauty, unless controlled, was dangerous. I opened my drawer, took out the carved wing, ran my fingers along the curve. Then I opened my old sketchbook, the one I never let anyone see. Page after page, there it was. The same shape repeated. Boxes, wings, faces half finished, rooms with no doors. I traced one with my thumb. Then without thinking, I drew a new one. A box. But this one was open. Empty inside. Light pouring out from a crack near the hinge. Not tidy. Not beautiful. But true. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't respond to messages. I opened the windows, let the cold bite at my fingers, and I carved something new. I didn't name it, just shaped it slowly until it felt like something I could live with. Some things we don't make for the world, some things we make just to hear ourselves breathing again. It was a small show, an off-season gallery in Chicago, tucked between a closed cafe and a shop that sold clocks. No press, no spotlight. Just white walls, soft track lighting, and 15 pieces I barely believed in. The air smelled like plaster and lemon cleaner. People wandered in and out, mostly quiet, mostly polite. A few touched the edge of the installations, even though the signs said not to. One woman asked if the hanging sculpture could be turned into a chandelier for her dining room. I was standing near the far corner when I saw him. The man with the blue scarf. He didn't look like the others. Didn't hover. Didn't chatter. Just stood in front of one of the central pieces, a long, spiraled structure made of folded maple veneer stitched with thin copper wire. It was meant to move with the air. It did. He stood so still, I thought he might be part of the show. After a long minute, he turned slightly toward me. His voice was quiet. "It feels like grief." I blinked, then nodded. "It is." That was the first time anyone had said what I meant without needing it translated. We had coffee in a place that smelled like nutmeg and steam. He stirred his tea 3 times before taking a sip. Didn't ask me where I was from. Didn't ask what inspired me. He just asked, "Do you work alone?" And I said, "Always." That night, we walked until the streetlights flickered on. He told me about his sister, about a barn they hid in during thunderstorms, how she died young, how he stopped painting after that. He didn't tell me his last name. I didn't offer mine. The next night, he came over. He brought wine and a book of Rilke poems. He read one aloud, his voice low, almost cautious. When he asked if he could stay, I didn't answer right away. Just reached over and turned off the lamp. In the morning, he asked about the box on my dresser. The old one? The first one. Still uneven, still carrying something I hadn't named. He touched the lid fingers light. "Did you make this?" I nodded. He looked closer. "I like that it's not perfect." His hand moved toward the hinge. I said, "Don't open that." My voice caught at the end. He didn't ask why, just nodded, and moved his hand away. There was silence after that, but not the kind that hurt. It was something else, something still, like the pause between waves. He left in the early afternoon. Didn't kiss me goodbye. Just held my gaze a moment longer than usual. That night, I didn't light the candle. I sat in the dark, not afraid, just awake. I thought about grief. Not the kind that comes from death, the quieter kind. The kind you collect in small moments unnoticed until you're carrying a weight no one can see. That box, it held more than paper clips, more than dust. It held a version of me that had stayed silent for too long. I picked it up. For the first time in years, I turned it in my hands. The carving was worn. The initials almost faded. Still there. I placed it back on the dresser, but this time I left the lid open just a crack. The message came on a Thursday. Just her voice on my voicemail, thinner than I remembered. "Elise, I need you to help me sell the house. No greeting, no softness. Just a request like time hadn't passed, like the space between us could be bridged by necessity." I listened to it twice. Then once more in the dark, the words coiling tighter each time. I hadn't seen the house in nearly 8 years. Not since the wedding. Not since that photo where my smile looked like restraint. Still, I said yes. Not because she asked. Not because I owed her. But because I needed to see it again, to walk through the quiet with eyes that no longer bowed. The house hadn't changed much. The paint had faded. The hedge out front was taller, almost wild. But the porch still creaked in the same place when I stepped on it. She answered the door leaning on a cane. Her hair was silver now, pulled back in a tight knot. Her face sharper, smaller. "Elise," she said, blinking like I was someone she'd almost forgotten. "Come in." The living room smelled like old perfume and heating dust. She'd covered the furniture in sheets as if preparing it for disappearance. We didn't hug. We didn't sit. She handed me a notebook with measurements and a copy of the deed. "I thought it would sell better if someone artistic handled it," she said. The words still held the same edge. I didn't flinch, just nodded. "Where should I start?" She gestured vaguely. "Wherever you like." I moved room to room with my camera photographing corners I used to hide in. The hallway felt smaller. the light weaker. In her bedroom, the vanity was nearly empty. Just a small hand mirror, a bottle of nail polish turned to glue. And beside it, the box. My box. The same one. Uneven, familiar. She'd cleaned it. The lid was closed. No dust. No paper clips. I didn't touch it. Just stood there watching my reflection shift in the mirror behind it. Later, as I measured the hallway closet, she stood in the doorway watching. "You've become different," she said. I turned, met her gaze. "I know." She didn't speak after that, just nodded once slow. Her hand tightened on the cane. When I finished for the day, she offered tea. I declined, my bag already slung over my shoulder, the door already open in my mind. At the front steps, she said, "You'll send me the listing when it's ready." I nodded. "Yes." Her eyes searched mine for something approval maybe, forgiveness. I gave her neither. Just silence, and a small, unbending truth in my spine. The next day, I listed the house. Chose soft lighting. Wrote a description that made it sound warmer than I remembered. But I left out one thing. That box. I didn't mention it. Didn't photograph it. I knew she would keep it. Not because it meant anything now, but because maybe she wasn't ready to let it go. And maybe I didn't need her to. Some things change quietly, not with declarations, just with the way your hand no longer trembles when you turn the key and leave. I didn't tell her when it happened, not because I was hiding it, but because there was no one to tell it to. Not really. The licensing deal came through on a Wednesday. I was in my studio, barefoot sawdust still clinging to my jeans, when the email landed. 5 properties, 2 countries, lighting furnishings installations, and with it a number. 1 with 6 zeros. I sat down on the floor, felt the weight of it like a new kind of silence. Not the kind she taught me thin, sharp withholding. This was different. Full. Calm. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there watching the afternoon sun bend across the floor, golden and indifferent. Like it had always been waiting. I walked across the room and opened the cabinet where I kept the old pieces. Not the finished ones. Not the ones that sold. The failures. The beginnings. And in the back, wrapped in a linen cloth, was a new box I had started months ago. It was heavier than the first. Thicker grain, mahogany. Gold hinges I'd found in a second-hand shop and polished until they caught light like mirrors. I hadn't known who it was for. Now I did. I worked on it for 3 days. Slowly, carefully. The way you handle something you don't intend to drop, even when no one's looking. I didn't carve her initials this time. I carved mine. On the bottom. Small. Centered. Inside, I laid a folded piece of paper on black velvet. On it, I wrote 6 words. "Thank you for the silence." I didn't sign it. Didn't seal the box. Just wrapped it in brown paper and mailed it to the only address I still remembered by heart. No return label. No note. I imagined her opening it, her fingers tracing the edges slower now, stiffer. I imagined her reading those 6 words and sitting very still. Maybe she would laugh. Maybe she wouldn't understand. It didn't matter. It wasn't for her. Not really. It was for the girl I used to be. The one who stood in that kitchen at 17, holding a box she built with blistered hands, waiting for someone to see her. It was for the space between what we're given and what we make from it. The next morning, I made coffee and stood by the window. A fog had rolled in, the kind that swallows sound, makes everything feel far away. And in that quiet, I heard her voice again, not the words, but the cadence. Measured, final, always turned slightly away. For years I'd chased that voice with my work, tried to shape it into something that would finally say, "You were right to try." But now, I didn't need it. Not the voice. Not the permission. The fog lifted by noon, and in the new light, everything looked simpler, sharper. That afternoon, I signed the final contract. Then I went back to the studio and carved something for myself. Not a box, not a wing, something new. A doorway standing open, no door, no hinges. Just the shape of passage. I didn't name it. I didn't need to. It stood in the center of the room like a question I'd finally stopped asking. It was my sister who called. Her voice came through thin and panicked. She fell in the kitchen. She couldn't get up. "Elise, can you come?" I said yes, before I even knew why. The flight was short, but the memories weren't. Every cloud outside the window felt like a shape I'd seen before in her wallpaper, in her silences, in the way she used to cut apples without ever looking down. The hospital was clean, bright humming, with quiet machines. She lay small in the bed, her face slack with sleep. Her hand curled in on itself like she was holding something only she could feel. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. Her hair had thinned. Her skin had grown transparent in places, as if she was slowly being erased by time. My sister sat in the corner folding and unfolding a brochure for physical therapy. "She'll be okay," she said. "It's just her hip." I nodded, didn't ask anything else. When the nurse came in, I stepped back. Let the fluorescent light fall across her face. It was the first time I'd ever seen her helpless. No pearls, no posture, just breath and bone and sleep. I sat beside her after they left. Didn't touch her hand. Didn't speak. Just watched the slow rise and fall of her chest. And I waited. It was hours before she stirred. Her eyes blinked open, pale and watery. She turned her head toward me. Her lips parted. "Elise." It wasn't a greeting. It was a question. I said yes and nothing else. She didn't ask why I came, didn't say thank you. We just sat there, her eyes drifting closed again, like the moment hadn't happened at all. But it had. And something in me shifted. Not like a crack, not loud. More like a seam loosening. The place where tension used to live quietly letting go. I stayed 2 days. Slept on the hospital couch. Walked the quiet hallways at night when I couldn't sleep. On the second night, I looked through her bag to find her hand lotion. And there it was. Tucked inside, carefully wrapped in a scarf. The box. Mine. Still polished. Still whole. I took it out. Held it in both hands. Opened the lid. Inside was a photograph, black and white, faded at the edges. Me at maybe 8. Hair crookedly cut, holding a pine cone like a treasure. She stood behind me, unsmiling. One hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I stared at it for a long time. Then put it back. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel much of anything. Just a quiet ache. The kind that doesn't demand attention. The kind that's lived inside you long enough to feel like company. When I left, she was asleep again. I didn't wake her. Just stood at the edge of the room, watching the way the sunlight cut across the floor. She looked peaceful, like a woman with no memory of the sharp things she'd said. Or maybe just a woman who finally stopped needing to hold them. On the flight home, I didn't look out the window. I just closed my eyes. And for the first time, I didn't carry her voice with me. Not her critiques. Not her silence. Not even her questions. Just the sound of my own breath. Steady. Unbothered. Enough. She passed in early autumn. The kind of morning that begins quiet and stays that way. My sister called again. Her voice steadier this time, but smaller somehow. She went in her sleep. I think that's what she would have wanted. I said I'd come. Not because I had to. because I knew I would want to see the house again one last time on my own terms. We sorted through the rooms like archivists. Old perfume bottles, yellowed linens, a drawer filled with foreign coins and dried pens. Most of it went to donation. A few things my sister kept, not much. I walked through slowly, room by room, let the stillness gather, let the dust settle on my breath. In her bedroom, I opened the vanity drawers one last time. They were mostly empty, but underneath a pile of scarves folded too neatly to be accidental, I found it. The box. My box. It was right where I'd left it, but different. Heavier in my hands. The lid opened with a soft creak. Inside, nothing. No photograph, no paper clips, no scent of lavender. Just air and time. I didn't put it down, didn't tuck it away. I carried it with me to the car. Held it in my lap the whole drive back. It wasn't a keepsake. It wasn't a wound. It was just mine. 3 weeks later, I held an auction. My first solo collection since the licensing deal. No hotel lobbies, no contracts, no furniture design. Just pieces that didn't need to explain themselves. I named the show Inheritance. No press release, no artist's statement. Just a single word on the wall. In the center of the gallery, under soft, warm light, I placed the box on a marble pedestal. No additions, no polish. Just as it was, as it always had been. I didn't give it a title, didn't sign it. Only a note on the card beside it, untitled. Origin unknown. People stopped. They lingered. One woman, older, gray-haired, wearing a thick gold ring, stood before it longer than the rest. She asked the gallery assistant if it was for sale. He nodded. She said, "It reminds me of something I forgot to remember." She paid $47,000. No haggling, no questions. I stood behind the curtain and watched her carry it out herself. No gloves, no assistance, just hands on wood, like she knew it could still hold something. That night, I walked home. Didn't take a cab. Didn't text anyone. I passed windows lit with strangers' lives. Dinner tables, laughter, the hum of televisions. And I felt something I hadn't before. Not release, not relief, just space. An old ache had left the room. No ceremony, no goodbye, just gone. Sometimes people ask what my mother was like. I never know where to begin. I say she was elegant because that's true. Or she was precise, which is also true. But the rest, the weight of being near her that doesn't translate. It never really did. I try to remember her voice, but it won't come. Not clearly. It's like trying to remember the smell of rain after it's dried. What lingers isn't the tone, but the silence that followed it. There was a shape to her quiet. A sharpness in the way she withheld praise warmth time. She gave selectively, strategically, as if affection were currency, and I never had enough credit. When I was younger, I confused that for strength. I thought maybe if I just worked harder, carved better, smiled smaller. She'd soften. She never did. But now, years later, I've stopped trying to turn her into someone else. I've stopped asking the old questions, the ones that sound like longing even when you say them in your head. Did she love me? Was I ever enough? They echo less and less these days. She taught me a lot. Not through intention, through absence. She showed me what silence can do when it fills a home. How it can grow into the shape of a person. How it can become your second skin. But I also learned that silence doesn't have to be cold. It can be refuge. It can be choice. These days, I keep a quiet studio. No music, no phones. Just the sound of my own breath and the scrape of blade against wood. There's a kind of peace in that, in building something from stillness instead of surviving inside it. People send me letters now, strangers, clients, design students. They say my work makes them feel held. like walking into a memory you didn't know you had. One woman wrote, "Your lighting makes the room feel like it's listening." That stayed with me, because for years I made things for someone who never listened, and now I don't need her to. I still have the last photo of her, the one from the hospital. She's sleeping, thin, frail, but not unkind, just finished. Sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't. It doesn't pull at me like it used to. Not out of bitterness, just clarity, just the simple truth of distance. Some people disappear while they're still alive. Some haunt you longer after, and some quietly slip out of your bones, leaving space where weight used to be. I've started carving open forms lately. No lids, no hinges, just shapes that hold light and let it spill. People ask what they're for. I say, they're not for anything, and they nod, and that's enough. There's a room in my house that I don't use for anything but watching shadows. It has one chair, one candle, and a wall I never finished painting. It reminds me that unfinished doesn't mean broken. It just means there's still room to breathe. It started with a drawing, just a line curved like a spine stretching into space, then a wall, then a window, then silence. I bought the land in late spring, upstate near a lake no one ever talks about. The air smelled like pine needles and rain. The soil was soft, dark, easy to break, easy to plant. No neighbors, no fences, just space. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not the buyers, not the galleries. I just drove up with a notebook full of sketches and a small crew that didn't ask questions. The studio went up in 3 weeks. Tall glass on the east side to catch morning light. A wooden floor unvarnished. No insulation, no distractions. In the center of the room, I placed a table. No tools on it, no plans. Just the box. Not the old one, not the second. A new one. Simple, uncarved, unopened. I didn't build it to give away, didn't build it for meaning, I just made it. With hands that no longer needed to prove anything. Not to her, not to anyone. Every night I light the same candle, set it next to the box. Watch the wax pool the flame lean and flicker. The room glows gold for an hour or so, then darkens slowly like memory letting go. Sometimes I sit in the chair I built with leftover beams. It creaks when I move. It breathes with me. I don't carve much anymore. Not in the way I used to. Now I shape time, shape stillness. The box sits untouched, not sacred, not symbolic, just there, a quiet witness. There are no photos in this room, no mirrors, no reminders of who I used to be. But the air knows, the walls remember. Some nights the wind slides against the windows like her voice used to soft, deliberate cold. But it doesn't enter. It stays outside, because this room isn't hers. It never was. It's mine. It holds nothing she gave me, only what I made despite her. And that is enough. I walk barefoot across the floor, feel every crack in the wood, every shift, every small fracture. It's not perfect. It breathes like I do, like the silence does now, soft, full open. Some people think healing is loud, that it arrives with announcements, applause, forgiveness. But I know better. It sounds like candlelight against wood, like a room that waits without demand, like a box you never have to open to know what's inside. And sometimes, on the very stillest nights, I sit at the table and whisper just one word, mine.